Hi, welcome to this presentation about sex on the beach, Grunion at Crown Beach. My name is Susan Ramos. I'm a naturalist at the Doug Sidon Visitor Center at Crab Cove, located at Crown Beach along Alameda shores. And currently I'm the acting wildlife biologist with the Stewardship Department. So I was asked to do this presentation because this is an absolutely amazing natural phenomenon that's going on in the East Bay parks, and I'm very excited to be able to share this information with you today. So we're going to be talking about what are Grunion, a little bit about the historic range, Grunion in the San Francisco Bay, some of our Grunion programs, community science, challenges that are facing the Grunion, locations, and more information. So what are Grunion and what are they doing on the beach? Well, Grunion is a small fish. It's silver in color. It's part of the silverside family. It's closely related to jack smelt and top smelt, and it doesn't have any teeth. So just a kind of an interesting fish. But what's so special about Grunion? They actually come up onto the sand to spawn, to mate, to lay their eggs. Very few fish in the world come up out of the water to do this. And the female, she'll bury herself down into the sand almost up to her eyeball where she'll lay her eggs. And then the males will wrap their bodies around her, deposit their milt or sperm. It will trickle down her body and fertilize the eggs, and then she'll wiggle out of the sand and they'll all swim off back into the water. She'll lay about 1,600 to 3,600 eggs at a time. So the original range of Grunion is, and they're only found along the California coast in Baja, nowhere else in the world. But their original range is more Southern California, from Point Conception in southern Santa Barbara County, all the way down to Baja, to Punta Abreojos in Baja, California. I first heard about Grunion when I attended a National Marine Educators Association conference many years ago, and they offered a field trip to the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium, which is located near Newport Beach. And when I went out at 10 o'clock at night on a full moon night, there were thousands of these Grunion fish flopping around on the beach. It was amazing. This is what you would see in Southern California. Also at the aquarium, they had little jars that you could shake up and the eggs would pop out. So in the wild, it's the agitation of the water 2 weeks after the eggs are hatched that causes the eggs to hatch. And Grunion can even delay their hatching. So if the tide isn't quite high enough, they can wait 2 extra weeks before their eggs hatch. So in Southern California, there's a whole culture that goes along with Grunion. Grunion are collected, and you can't collect Grunion. When you go fishing for Grunion, you can't collect them with a fishing pole or a net or even dig a hole. You have to grab them with your bare hands. And many people will eat them. They'll fry them up, barbecue, fish tacos. I've never actually tasted a Grunion. I've heard they're tasty, but I've never tried one. Although I have tried the Grunion beer, which is named after the local fish. So how did Grunion get to the San Francisco Bay, and why am I talking about Grunion if this is a Southern California thing? And are they naturally expanding their range? Is it climate change? Have they been in the San Francisco Bay before? Well, it's really interesting. Some people think that in the 1998-1999 El Nino event, there was warm water surges that pushed the Grunion farther north. We do know that in 1860 there is a record of Grunion in a San Francisco fish market, but they weren't really recorded much after that, not until Well, I should back up a little bit. Do we know if Grunion were around at the time of the Ohlone people? We know that Ohlone people today, like this picture is showing from the Ohlone Cafe, will eat fish. But did Ohlone people in the past eat Grunion? We don't really know. I had a researcher come and do some studies on Grunion. He came to one of my programs. He collected some Grunion. He was testing the bones of the current day Grunion and trying to compare them with Grunion that were bones that, well, with bones, fish bones that were found in shell mounds. And unfortunately, his findings were inconclusive because Grunion fish bones are very, very similar to jack smelt and top smelt. So we don't really know if Ohlone people in the past were eating Grunion. We do know that in around the year 2001, 2005, the California Fish and Wildlife Department was out trawling, which they do in order to monitor fish in the San Francisco Bay. And at that time, they were finding Grunion in their trawling. We also know that in the year 2004, 2005, Grunion were being found at a least tern colony. They were being dropped and fed to their chicks. And this is pretty unusual because least terns feed during the day, but Grunion usually come out at night. So it was a very, very interesting thing that was going on. In around the year 2007, the Pepperdine University held a Grunion greeter workshop, and they sent people out along Crown Beach, and they found about a dozen fish. But then in 2008, 2009, they disappeared from the San Francisco Bay, and nobody really knows why or what had happened. Well, I had heard all of these stories. So in the year 2017, I decided to offer a program. I thought I would just go out along the beach at midnight and look for these fish. So my thought was I would start one night at the visitor center in the northern part of Crown Beach, and we would walk east to see if there were any fish. And then the next night we would start down on the southern part of the beach at Park Street, and we would walk west and just see what we could find if there were any Grunion. And we went out on a full moon night because Grunion like high tides, so it has to be either a full moon or a new moon, which means there's no moon out. That's the time to look for Grunion. And there's about a 2-hour window when they might show up. So we went out, and not only did we find a few Grunion, a dozen Grunion, 100 Grunion, we found thousands of Grunion along Crown Beach. And I was absolutely hooked, and I have been doing Grunion programs ever since. So if you come to one of my Grunion programs, we meet at the Surf Shack, which is right along where the beach sort of bends, and I'll do a quick introduction about Grunion, and then we'll go out on the shore. We cover our flashlights with red cellophane or red tape in order to minimize the impact to the fish, and we record and count the numbers of Grunion that we're seeing. As I said, we've been seeing Grunion here, and it's a very special season. It's usually between May and July. The peak times are May and June, and in the past I've seen them in August, but the last couple of years we have not been seeing them in August. This is a video that Ed Culver from our fisheries department took this past summer of the Grunion coming up on the beach. So you can see all these silvery fish in the water and on the sand. You can see these silvery fish dancing on the sand. If you look up close, this is what's happening. You can see the males have just fertilized the eggs. The female is now coming out of the little hole that she dug where she deposited her eggs. The waves come and they swim away. That's how fast it happens. So a couple of years ago, I hosted a Grunion greeter workshop, inviting Pepperdine University and Karen Martin, who's like the expert of Grunion, to Crab Cove. And we held a workshop, and we're trying to get volunteers to go out and look for Grunion along the beach. And we use this Walker scale. So this kind of gives us an idea of the abundance of Grunion, and I report this to Pepperdine University every time we go out. This Walker scale was developed by a man named Boyd Walker in the 1940s, and this man was so dedicated that every night, or almost every night, for 3 years, he went out and looked for Grunion. And he was the one that discovered that Grunion are tied to the high tides during the spring and summer months. So we take this information and, like I said, we report it to the Grunion organization, which is affiliated with Pepperdine University, and they've taken these records and records from throughout California, and they discovered that Grunion numbers are decreasing, and they were able to show this data to the Fish and Wildlife Department and change some of the regulations. So it used to be that fishing for Grunion was closed in April and May, and now that has been extended so that fishing is closed April, May, and June, and there's also a limit of how many Grunion you can take. On our programs here in the San Francisco Bay, we encourage observing and conserving. We don't go fishing for Grunion. We just observe them. So in this past summer, we also gathered some Grunion eggs, and those are sent to Pepperdine University. They're doing some genetic studies. They have studied Grunion, and they do know that the Grunion in the San Francisco Bay and the Southern California Grunion are the same species, but they are different. There are some genetic differences because they're much smaller in the San Francisco Bay, and so these eggs have been sent to do additional Grunion genetic studies just to find out even more about them. There are some challenges, though, that the Grunion are facing here in the San Francisco Bay. One of the things at Crown Beach is that Crown Beach is a man-made beach, and in the wintertime there's a lot of winter storms, and the sand sort of gets dispersed and piled up, and so every spring the sand has to be redistributed across the beach. But they have to wait until the snowy plover, who comes to Crown Beach during the winter and rests there, usually inside the symbolic fencing. We call it symbolic fencing because the snowy plovers don't always stay inside the fence. But because they're a threatened species, the snowy plovers, we have to wait before we can do the redistribution of sand along the beach. And this is often in May. And so there's kind of this overlap of, are the Grunion going to show up and lay their eggs before the sand moving happens? So there are some challenges that they have to face. And the thing that I think is so amazing is that on a summer day, there can be thousands of people at the beach, and they don't even know that this amazing natural phenomenon is happening at night, right in the very same spot that they might be sitting to have their beach time. So that's why I'm so excited to share this and to let people know that this is actually happening. And are there Grunion at other locations? We don't really know. We know there are Grunion at Crissy Field. We know the northern location for Grunion is Tomales Bay, but we don't know if they're at other locations. My son and I went out to Judge John Sutter, and we looked around. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning, so that was really interesting. We didn't see any. We also have gone to Miller Knox to look for Grunion there, and all we saw was a skunk, so we got skunked. We didn't see any Grunion, but we don't know if we were there at the exact time in that 2-hour window. We also don't know if there are Grunion at Hayward Shoreline or Brooks Island. I would just love to find out if there are Grunion at some of the other locations. So if you're interested in joining me in this quest for more information, please contact me. So I want to kind of end our time together. I know you might have been sitting a lot listening to some of these presentations. I encourage you right now to stand up and join in the Grunion groove.
And now I will perform the Grunion dance.
So here's the Grunion dance. Go ahead and shake yourself down into that sand, just like you were laying eggs. So thank you so much for joining me in this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or you want to join me on a Grunion program, this is my email address. If you want to find out more information, I encourage you to look up grunion.org. There's some great videos and lots more information. Thank you so much for joining me.